Sold by her family and taken to the castle, there she discovered what it meant to be loved. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. The rain had been falling for days, swallowing the little village in mud and silence. Carts stood empty. The fields had turned to rot, and smoke no longer rose from the cottages. Inside one of them, Evelyn sat by the fire, her hands trembling as her father counted the few remaining grains in a wooden bowl. Her younger brothers coughed in their sleep, and her mother stared at the wall, eyes hollow, as if the hunger had already taken her soul. A knock came at the door, 3 hard, deliberate raps that made Evelyn's heart stop. Everyone knew that sound. It was the steward from Ravenshire Castle. Her father opened the door before she could move, and the man stepped in tall, wrapped in a dark cloak soaked with rain. He smelled of the stables and the iron of the castle. "Your debts are due," he said, voice flat. "Lord Ravenshire has been merciful for long enough." Her father's voice cracked. "Mercy don't fill the fields. The plague took half our workers. The winter—" "The Lord is not the cause of your misery," the steward cut him off. He dropped a small sack onto the table. The dull thud of grain filled the room. "He offers this in exchange for the girl." The silence that followed was thick and cruel. Evelyn lifted her eyes slowly. For a moment she thought she had misheard, but her mother's head dropped, and her father's hands shook as he pushed the sack toward the light. "No," Evelyn whispered. "You can't." Her father didn't look at her. "We've no choice, Eve. It's this, or the little ones die before morning." Her chest burned. "I'll find work. I'll go to the next town." "No one hires a woman now," the steward said coldly. "Half the villages are gone. The castle needs servants. She'll be fed and clothed. Better than dying here." Evelyn looked at her mother, but the woman just closed her eyes. Her father took a deep breath and nodded to the steward. "Take her." The man seized her arm before she could protest. She struggled, the chair falling behind her. "Papa, please." Her father didn't meet her gaze. The last thing she heard as she was dragged into the rain was the faint rattle of the grain sack being tied shut. The journey to Ravenshire took 2 days. She was thrown into the back of a covered cart with another girl who didn't speak. Outside, the countryside was grey and silent. From time to time she heard the cry of crows or the bell of a chapel tolling for the dead. She wanted to pray, but no words came. When the cart stopped at last, the air was colder, sharper. A vast stone wall rose before them, wrapped in mist. Ravenshire Castle. Evelyn felt her stomach twist. 2 guards lifted her out roughly and led her through a courtyard lined with torches. She saw faces, maids, soldiers, kitchen boys, all watching her with a mixture of pity and curiosity. "New one for the Lord's service," one guard muttered. "Poor thing won't last a week." Inside, the hall smelled of wax and smoke. The steward who had taken her spoke quickly to an older woman in grey. "The Lord wants her in his household." The woman frowned. "He asked for another servant. That's unlike him." "His command was clear." The woman's sharp eyes scanned Evelyn from head to toe. "Fine. She'll start tomorrow. The Lord doesn't tolerate idleness." They led her through a narrow staircase to a small room under the eaves. There was a cot, a basin, and a single candle. The door closed behind her, leaving her in silence. For the first time since she'd left home, she allowed herself to cry. Her tears fell soundlessly onto the thin blanket, mixing with the dust. The next morning she was given a plain dress and sent to the kitchens. The servants whispered as she passed. Some smiled with pity, others smirked. "The new girl," one of them said, "the one the Lord bought himself." Evelyn pretended not to hear. She spent the day scrubbing floors until her hands bled, her mind fixed on survival. When dusk came, the same steward appeared again. "You, come with me." Her heart thudded. "For what?" "The Lord has requested your presence." She followed him up the grand staircase where portraits of long-dead Ravenshires lined the walls, their painted eyes cold and unkind. They stopped before a massive wooden door. "Do not speak unless spoken to," the steward warned. He knocked once, then pushed it open. The room was dimly lit by the fire. Evelyn's eyes adjusted slowly, and she saw a tall man standing by the window, his back to her. His hair was dark, his shoulders broad, and his presence filled the space like thunder. "Leave us," he said without turning. The steward bowed and slipped out, closing the door behind him. For a long moment, silence. Evelyn stood frozen, her hands clasped tightly. The man turned at last. His face was pale, marked by a thin scar along his temple. His eyes, grey as stone, met hers. "So," he said quietly, "you're the one they sent me." Evelyn swallowed hard. "My lord, I didn't know why I was brought here." "You'll learn soon enough." He studied her in silence, his gaze unreadable. "What's your name?" "Evelyn." He nodded slightly, as if testing the sound. "How old are you?" 17, my lord." "Too young to have known much of mercy," he murmured. "Tell me, Evelyn, do you fear me?" The question caught her off guard. I don't know you, my lord." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, though it didn't reach his eyes. An honest answer. "Most tremble before I speak." "I'm trembling now," she said softly. That made him turn fully toward the fire. "You'll serve in the upper halls. You'll keep my study in order, attend to my requests, and speak no gossip. Do you understand?" "Yes, my lord." He looked over his shoulder. "If you do your duty, you'll be safe here." Evelyn hesitated. "And if I fail?" His gaze met hers again. "Then the walls will teach you fear." The chill in his voice silenced her. He moved closer, and she could see the fatigue beneath his stern expression. There was something broken there, something heavy. "You may go," he said finally. "Your chamber is at the end of the west corridor. The steward will show you." She curtsied awkwardly and turned to leave, but as her hand touched the door, he spoke again. "Evelyn." She froze. "Do not trust easily," he said, his tone quieter now. "This castle eats the hearts of those who do." She nodded and slipped out into the corridor, her pulse still racing. The next days passed in wary routine. Evelyn rose before dawn, carried trays, polished brass, swept ashes. The castle was a maze of shadows and whispers. Servants spoke in half-truths, their eyes darting to the lord's closed doors. One afternoon, while she dusted the shelves in his study, she heard footsteps behind her. "You missed a spot," a voice said. She turned. It was Lord Ravenshire himself, watching her from the doorway. She dropped the cloth in surprise. "Forgive me, my lord. I didn't mean—" He raised a hand. "You needn't apologize. I only meant to see how you fare." Her pulse quickened. I'm learning, my lord. Do they treat you well?" "Yes," she lied. He tilted his head slightly. "You lie poorly." Evelyn lowered her gaze. "It isn't my place to complain." "Perhaps not," he said. "But if injustice is done, I prefer to hear it from your lips than from rumor." The way he said it made her chest tighten. "Why do you care, my lord? I'm just a servant." He looked past her toward the window. "Because once, someone cared for me when I didn't deserve it." She wanted to ask more, but he turned and left, the sound of his boots echoing down the hall. That night, while she lay awake, she wondered what kind of man he truly was. The feared Lord Ravenshire, whose name kept peasants silent, yet whose eyes spoke of something gentler, something lost. Days blurred into weeks. She began to notice small things, how he always paused before entering the chapel, how his hands trembled slightly when he poured his own wine, how he never joined the others at meals. Then, one evening, the steward appeared again at her door. "The Lord requests you in the great hall," he said. Evelyn followed him down the stairs. The hall was dim, the fire nearly out. Lord Ravenshire stood near the hearth, a parchment in his hand. He looked up as she entered. "I sent for you," he said. "Come closer." She obeyed, her steps echoing in the vast emptiness. "Tell me," he said, "what do people in the village say about me?" Evelyn hesitated. "They say you're cruel, my lord, that no one leaves your service." His eyes hardened for a moment, then softened again. "And what do you believe?" "I don't know," she answered truthfully. "You saved my family from hunger, but you bought me." He set the parchment down slowly. Sometimes mercy and cruelty wear the same face. Before she could answer, a loud clang echoed through the hall, the wind slamming a window open. She startled, and he turned sharply, crossing the room in a stride to close it. For a brief second his sleeve lifted, revealing an old scar along his wrist. When he noticed her gaze, he drew the sleeve down again. "Go to your room," he said quietly. "It's late." She obeyed, though questions burned inside her. Her chamber was small, cold, but that night she couldn't sleep. The wind howled outside, and somewhere in the distance she thought she heard the faint toll of a bell. She sat upright, heart pounding, when a soft sound reached her. Footsteps, slow and heavy, stopping outside her door. The latch moved, the door creaked open, and a tall shadow filled the frame. "Evelyn," a deep voice said from the darkness. Evelyn froze. The fire from the hallway cast the Lord's shadow long across her bed. Her breath caught, but he didn't move closer. For a moment, the only sound was the wind rattling the window panes. "My lord?" she whispered. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said, his voice low. "I couldn't sleep." She stood, clutching the blanket to her chest. "Why are you here?" He hesitated before answering. "I heard you crying earlier." Her cheeks burned. "You shouldn't have." "I live in a house made of stone," he said, "but sound travels, especially sorrow." She didn't know what to say. He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept in days. For the first time she noticed the shadows under his eyes and the stiffness in his movements. "I wanted to be sure you weren't mistreated," he continued. "I'm fine, my lord." His gaze searched hers, testing her words. "Fine," he repeated quietly. "That word means nothing in this place." She held her breath. He looked around the small room. The thin blanket, the cracked basin, the flickering candle. "This chamber is unfit for anyone," he said. "Tomorrow I'll have you moved closer to the servants' hall." "That's not necessary," she said quickly. "I don't wish to trouble you." He looked almost amused. "You think I would be troubled by a bed?" Her heart pounded. "I think you have greater things to think of, my lord." A faint smile appeared and vanished again. "Perhaps I do. But for tonight, rest. Fear has a way of growing in the dark." She nodded, unable to speak. He turned toward the door, but before leaving, he looked back once more. "Evelyn," he said softly, "you may speak to me freely should you ever need to." And then he was gone, leaving only the echo of his footsteps and the slow fading of the candle flame. The next morning she was given a new room, brighter and closer to the main corridor. The maids noticed immediately. One of them, a plump woman named Hilda, gave her a knowing look. "Seems the Lord's taken a liking to you," she said with a smirk. "That's not true," Evelyn replied quickly. "Careful, girl. Around here, what people believe matters more than what's true." By noon, the whispers had begun. They followed her through the halls, curling like smoke. She kept her head down, cleaning, carrying, pretending not to hear. Yet every time she turned, someone was watching her. When she passed near the courtyard, she heard two guards talking. "The Lord's changed since the new girl arrived," one said. "Changed? Don't be a fool. No one changes in that castle. They just grow colder." Still, that evening, when she served him his meal, she felt his eyes linger on her hands as she placed the tray on the table. "Sit," he said suddenly. She froze. "My lord?" "I said sit." She obeyed, perching awkwardly on the edge of the chair opposite him. The fire crackled between them. "You've been here a fortnight," he said. "Tell me, do you still wish to run away?" She looked up, startled. "Did I ever say I did?" "You don't need to say it. I see it in your eyes every time you look at the gate." Her fingers tightened on her skirt. "If I could leave, my family would starve. And yet you'd go if you could," he murmured. She didn't answer. He leaned back. "You remind me of someone," he said after a moment. "She used to speak of freedom too." "Was she a servant?" He shook his head. "She was my wife." Evelyn felt the air shift. "Forgive me, my lord. I didn't mean—" He waved a hand. "It was long ago." His voice was quiet, almost fragile. "She died when the war took the Northfields. Since then, the castle has been quieter." She didn't know what to say. Silence filled the space between them until he spoke again. "People here fear me," he said. "Do you?" Her first instinct was to lie, but his eyes demanded truth. "Sometimes," she said. He nodded slowly. "Good. Fear is honest. Kindness is too," she said before she could stop herself. For a heartbeat, he looked surprised. Then something softened in his expression. "Perhaps," he said, "but kindness is dangerous." He rose, ending the conversation. "You may go." That night, as she walked back through the hall, she heard laughter behind her. Two maids were whispering, their words sharp as knives. "She dines with him now," one said. "How convenient." Evelyn turned and faced them. "You're mistaken," she said firmly. "Of course," the other replied. "Mistaken. That's what they all say. She walked away before the tears could fall. The next day brought a storm. The castle trembled under the wind, and the corridors darkened early. Evelyn was sent to clean the great hall, where portraits lined the walls, stern faces of men who looked down as if judging her every move. She was polishing a candle holder when the door opened. "Still working," the Lord's voice said behind her. She straightened quickly. "The steward asked me to finish before supper." He crossed the room, his steps quiet on the stone. "You work too hard." "I prefer it to idleness," she said. He stopped beside her. "Tell me, Evelyn, what would you do if you were free?" She glanced at him, uncertain. "I would go home. Find my brothers. Plant something. Something. Anything that grows," she said. "I used to believe things could grow anywhere if given care." He looked at her then. Really looked. As though her words had cracked something open inside him. "That's a rare belief." "Do you not believe it, my lord?" "I believed once, but the world has ways of burning what you plant." She met his gaze, and for a moment the silence between them felt like understanding. Then the door burst open. "My lord!" The steward hurried in, breathless. "The roof in the east wing has collapsed." William turned sharply. "Send men to repair it at once." "Yes, my lord." The steward bowed and left. William turned back to Evelyn. "Go to your chamber. The storm's worsening." She nodded and left, though her heart was still pounding. That night thunder shook the castle. She couldn't sleep. When she rose to close the window, she saw light from the study below. Against her better judgment, she crept down the stairs. Through the half-open door, she saw him standing before a large portrait, a woman with soft features, painted in shades of faded gold. His head was bowed, one hand pressed against the frame. "My lord," she whispered. He turned sharply, startled. For a moment anger flashed in his eyes, but it faded when he saw her expression. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I heard the storm. I thought you might need help." "Help?" His tone softened. "No one can help what's gone." She stepped closer, glancing at the portrait. "Is that her?" "Yes." His voice dropped. "Her name was Alice. She looks kind." "She was," he said, barely audible. "And I failed her." The thunder rolled again, and for a heartbeat Evelyn saw not the Lord of Ravenshire but a man broken by his own silence. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words felt too small. "You should rest," he said finally. "Will you?" she asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he sat by the fire, staring into the flames. She lingered at the door. "Good night, my lord." "Good night, Evelyn." She returned to her room, her thoughts tangled and restless. The next morning she woke before dawn. When she went to the kitchens, the servants were buzzing with gossip. "They say the Lord didn't sleep again," Hilda whispered. "He walks the halls till morning, talking to no one." Evelyn tried to ignore it, but as the day went on, the rumours grew. By evening, she was certain everyone in the castle was watching her. When she brought water to the Lord's chamber that night, he was seated at his desk, surrounded by papers. He looked up as she entered. "You've heard them, haven't you?" he said quietly. She hesitated. "Heard what, my lord?" "The whispers. They think there's reason for my interest in you." Her throat tightened. "I never meant to—" He raised a hand. "You've done nothing wrong, but they'll speak anyway." "Then why keep me near?" she asked. "Why not send me to another hall?" His jaw tightened. "Because I don't trust them with you." She blinked, startled. "With me?" He stood, pacing. "There are people here who would see harm done for less than gossip. You don't yet understand how deep the rot runs in these walls." "Then teach me," she said, surprising herself. He stopped and looked at her. "You have courage," he murmured. "But courage is dangerous here too." She set down the picture. "I'd rather face danger than lies." Something flickered in his eyes, a spark of respect, or perhaps fear. "You shouldn't say such things." "Why not?" "You said I could speak freely." He studied her, and for the first time she thought she saw warmth behind his silence. "You remind me," he said slowly, "of what I once hoped for." She didn't dare ask what that was. He turned toward the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "You may go." She curtsied and moved to the door. Just as she reached for the handle, a gust of wind blew it open, scattering papers across the floor. She turned to help him gather them, but he stopped her with a look. "Leave them," he said. She froze. He was staring at one parchment in particular, a letter with a broken seal. His expression hardened, and he folded it quickly, slipping it into his coat. "What is it?" she asked. "Nothing you need worry about," he replied, though his tone betrayed unease. Their eyes met again. Something unspoken passed between them, fragile and uncertain. She backed away slowly. "Good night, my lord." He didn't answer. As she closed the door behind her, she heard his voice, soft and low, speaking to himself. "Don't make me remember, Evelyn." She pressed her back to the cold stone wall, her heart hammering. From inside the chamber came the sound of breaking glass. Evelyn stood outside his door, frozen. The echo of his voice, broken, pleading, lingered in the corridor. She pressed her hand to her chest, uncertain whether to go back or flee. The servant's footsteps echoed in the distance, so she slipped quietly toward her room, her thoughts tangled with fear and pity. The next morning she moved through her chores like a ghost. The castle buzzed with new rumors. Some claimed the lord had thrown a goblet against the wall. Others whispered he had gone mad, haunted by his dead wife. Evelyn said nothing, though the sound of that cry still clung to her like a secret. By noon, the steward found her in the kitchen. "The lord requests your presence," he said sharply. Her heart jumped. "Now?" "Now." The corridors seemed colder as she followed him. When they reached the lord's study, the steward bowed and left her alone at the door. She hesitated, then knocked softly. "Enter," came his voice. He stood by the fire again, pale but calm, dressed in dark velvet. The shattered glass from the night before had been cleared away. His eyes, though tired, met hers steadily. "You heard me last night," he said without preamble. She swallowed hard. "Yes, my lord." "I spoke a name." "Yes." "Do you know who she was?" "Your wife," Evelyn said quietly. He nodded once, then looked back at the fire. "Alice. She died 10 years ago this winter." Evelyn's voice was gentle. "I'm sorry." "Sorry." He said it like it was a foreign word. "I've heard that so often it's lost meaning. Pity is a soft thing. It doesn't rebuild what's been broken." "I didn't mean pity," she said. "Only I understand loss." That made him turn. "What have you lost, Evelyn?" She hesitated. "My family's love, I suppose. They traded me for food." He blinked, as if realizing something he hadn't considered. "Yes," he said slowly. "You did not come here by choice." "No one asked if I wished it," she said. "But I suppose hunger makes beasts of people." He regarded her for a long moment. "And yet you don't seem broken." "Maybe I am," she said softly. "Just not where you can see." The firelight flickered between them. Then, unexpectedly, he said, "Sit." She obeyed. He poured wine into 2 cups and handed one to her. She hesitated. "It's not poison," he said, almost amused. "I didn't think it was." He watched her sip. "Tell me something, Evelyn. Do you hate your father?" Her throat tightened. "I don't know. Some days, yes. Some days, I miss him." "Strange," he murmured. "To miss what hurt you. Maybe it's the memory that's kinder than the truth." He looked at her with something that might have been admiration or sorrow. "You speak like someone twice your age." "I've lived more than I wanted to." A silence settled between them, not cold, but heavy with understanding. At last he said, "You may go, but keep this conversation between us." She nodded and left, though her thoughts followed her all the way back to the servants' quarters. That evening, as she scrubbed the floor of the great hall, 2 kitchen maids whispered nearby. "They say the lord's been meeting her in private," one said. "She must be clever to charm him so soon," the other replied. Evelyn pretended not to hear, but their words dug deep. Later, when she went to fetch water, she found Hilda waiting by the well. "You'd best be careful," Hilda warned. "The castle's tongues are sharper than the Lord's sword." "I've done nothing wrong." "Right and wrong don't matter. Envy does." Evelyn lifted the bucket. "Then let them envy." She walked away before Hilda could answer, though her pulse throbbed in her ears. The next days passed with tension hanging over the castle like smoke. Lord Ravenshire rarely left his study, yet whenever he appeared, his eyes seemed to search for her. Once, in the corridor, he passed so close their hands almost brushed. She felt the warmth of him long after he'd gone. Then, one afternoon, as she carried linens through the courtyard, an older soldier stopped her. His face was weathered, his left arm bound in a sling. "You're the new servant," he said. She nodded cautiously. "Yes." He leaned on his cane. "Do you know why he keeps to himself, our lord?" "I've heard stories," she said. "None of them sound kind." The soldier chuckled dryly. "They never are. I served with him once, in the border wars. He wasn't cruel then, just proud, young, foolish. But he came back different." "Because of his wife?" The old man shook his head. "Because of what he did after she died. The battle ended, but he stayed. Buried every man with his own hands. Never spoke for 3 months after that. When he returned, he said he'd never kneel to another soul again." Evelyn's breath caught. "That's not cruelty." "No," the man said, "but it can look like it." She thanked him and continued on, her thoughts spinning. That night, thunder rolled again across the hills. A messenger arrived at the gate, soaked and pale, bringing news from the capital. Evelyn didn't hear what it was, but the tension spread quickly, guards moving faster, servants whispering more quietly. Near midnight, she was sent to deliver fresh candles to the Lord's chamber. She knocked and his voice answered, low and strained. "Come." He stood by the desk, a letter open in his hand. His jaw was tight. "Bad news, my lord." He looked up, then folded the letter sharply. "Nothing that concerns you. Forgive me." He exhaled and rubbed his temple. "No, I shouldn't have snapped. The Crown has demanded new levies, more men for the war in the south, more taxes, always more." Evelyn hesitated. "Will you go to war again?" "No," he said flatly. "Let the young die for a cause that means nothing. I've buried enough names." Something in his tone made her step closer. "You carry more sorrow than any man I've met." He gave a small, bitter smile. "Sorrow is a companion that never leaves." "Then maybe it's time to let it rest." He looked at her sharply. "And how would you know how to rest it?" "I don't," she admitted. "But I'd like to learn." For a moment, neither spoke. Then quietly, he said, "Evelyn, when you speak, I almost believe in peace again." Her heart stuttered. "I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize." He turned away, voice rough. "You remind me of what I lost. That's not your fault." She placed the candles on the table and started for the door, but his voice stopped her. "Wait." She turned back. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of parchment. "This is a list of the villages suffering famine. The steward will take supplies in the morning. See that the stores are ready." "Yes, my lord." "Good," he said, but his eyes lingered on her. "You may go." When she left, she could still feel his gaze on her back. The next day she worked from dawn to dusk, gathering goods from the cellar, grain, cloth, oil. As she carried the last bundle through the courtyard, she saw him speaking with the steward near the gate. He wore a dark cloak, rain dripping from the hem. "Is the cart ready?" he asked. "Yes, my lord," the steward replied, "but the roads are dangerous." "Then I'll ride with them." Evelyn stepped forward. "You, my lord? Alone?" He turned to her, surprised. "Do you doubt I can?" "No," she said quickly. "Only the people should see that their lord cares, not risks himself." He looked at her for a long moment, then gave a faint smile. "Perhaps you're right." He handed the reins to the steward. "Go without me. Tell them it's from Ravenshire." When he passed her on his way back inside, he murmured, "You speak boldly, Evelyn." She lowered her head. "Forgive me. Never apologize for truth," he said, and walked away. Later that evening, as the rain beat against the windows, she sat by the kitchen hearth, too restless to eat. The old soldier from before came limping in. "Strange thing," he said. "The Lord used to hate storms, wouldn't leave his chambers, but lately he's been walking the halls when it rains." Evelyn looked up sharply. "Walking where?" "Mostly the west wing, where his wife's portrait hangs." After he left, curiosity gnawed at her. She waited until the castle grew quiet, then took a candle and crept through the west corridor. The moonlight shone through broken glass, silvering the stone. At the far end, the portrait glimmered faintly. The same woman, Alice, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Evelyn stopped, unsure why she'd come. Then she heard the soft sound of boots behind her. "You shouldn't be here," said the familiar voice. She turned. Lord Ravenshire stood a few paces away, his cloak half unfastened, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to intrude." His eyes moved to the portrait. "She looks kinder in paint than she ever was." Evelyn frowned. You speak ill of the dead? He let out a bitter laugh. No, I speak truth. She was lovely, yes. But love can die before the body does. Ours did long before that battle took her. She didn't know what to say. He stepped closer. How you see me as a man cursed by grief. But grief is only half the story. Guilt is the rest. What guilt? He looked away. I left her when she begged me to stay. Thought honor meant war. When I returned, she was gone. That is what the songs never tell. The hero always comes home too late. Evelyn's throat ached. I'm sorry. He smiled faintly. There's that word again. They stood in silence, the candle trembling between them. Then he said quietly, You should rest, Evelyn. The castle will whisper if it sees you here. She nodded, but before she turned to go, he reached out and touched her wrist. A fleeting, uncertain gesture. Thank you for listening, he murmured. Her pulse quickened. Always, my lord. He released her and stepped back. Go. She hurried away, heart racing. As she turned the corner, she heard footsteps again. This time not his. The steward emerged from the shadows, eyes narrow, watching her leave. The next morning the castle buzzed with strange energy. Servants whispered in corners, glancing toward Evelyn whenever she passed. She tried to ignore them, but the looks followed her like shadows. Hilda pulled her aside near the bread ovens. Keep your head low today, she warned. The steward's been talking to Lady Margaret. Who's Lady Margaret? The one who rules the household when the Lord doesn't. She's loyal, yes, but only to the gossip that keeps her in power. Evelyn frowned. I've done nothing wrong. That won't matter. The steward saw you in the West Wing last night. Evelyn's stomach dropped. He saw us talking. He saw enough. Be careful, girl. Words can kill faster than swords in this place. She thanked her quietly and went to the laundry, her thoughts spinning. All day people's stares seemed sharper, their whispers louder. By evening, when she carried fresh towels to the Lord's chamber, even the guards at the door exchanged knowing glances. Inside, William Ravenshire was standing by the fire reading. When he looked up, the lines on his face softened. You look troubled, he said. I'm fine, my lord. That word again, he said with faint amusement. Every time you say it, I believe it less. She smiled weakly. There's talk in the castle. He set the book down. There's always talk. About me, she added quietly. His expression darkened. What kind of talk? That you and I... She stopped, unable to finish. He exhaled sharply. Fools and their tongues, let them talk. I owe them no explanations. But it could ruin me, she said. I'm no one, my lord. I have no protection. He studied her for a long moment, then said softly, You have mine. Her pulse quickened. That only fuels their lies. He turned toward the fire. Do you regret speaking to me last night? No, she said without hesitation. Then I'll not regret it either. The firmness in his voice left her breathless. Before she could reply, a knock sounded at the door. The steward entered, bowing stiffly. My lord, he said, Lady Margaret requests your presence in the hall. William's jaw tightened. For what reason? She didn't say, my lord, only that it concerns the new servant. Evelyn's stomach twisted. William's gaze flicked to her. Stay here, he said quietly. The steward frowned. My lord, she is the matter in question. I said stay, William repeated, his tone sharp. The steward hesitated, then bowed again and left. Evelyn stared at the fire, her hands trembling. When William returned some time later, his expression was unreadable. What happened? She asked. He removed his gloves slowly. Lady Margaret believes your presence has unsettled the household. She accused me? She implied. Evelyn's throat tightened. And what did you say? I told her I decide what unsettles my household. She looked at him in disbelief. That won't stop them. He gave a short laugh without humor. No, but it will silence them for now. She wanted to thank him, but the words caught. He noticed. Don't fear them, he said. You've done nothing wrong. I wish that were enough, she murmured. He studied her again, then reached for something on the table. It was a rose, withered, dried, but still red at its core. When my wife died, he said, this was the last bloom from her garden. I kept it, because I thought nothing living could ever grow here again. Evelyn watched as he turned it between his fingers. I found it again last week, he continued, and thought it should have a purpose. Here, he extended it to her. She hesitated. I can't take that. You can, he said softly. It's just a rose now. It belongs to whoever believes something can still grow. Her eyes stung. Thank you, my lord. He nodded once, his voice almost tender. Keep it safe. The moment stretched, fragile and warm, but the door burst open. Lady Margaret stood there, tall and severe, with the steward beside her. My lord, she said coolly, I warned you that appearances matter. William's eyes hardened. You forget yourself, Margaret. I forget nothing, she replied. Your servants talk of impropriety, of favoritism, and now you're giving her gifts. Evelyn stepped forward. My lady, please. Silence, Margaret snapped. You speak when spoken to. William's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. You will not speak to her that way. She is a servant, Margaret said coldly, bought for service, not for comfort. Evelyn felt her cheeks burn. William stepped closer to Margaret, his tone like steel. You will apologize to her. Margaret's lips thinned. If I apologize, it will be to the dignity of this house, not to her. William's hand clenched at his side. For a tense moment, no one moved. Finally, he said, Leave us, both of you. Margaret curtsied stiffly and swept out, the steward following. Evelyn stood still, shaken. My lord, you shouldn't have defended me. I'll defend who I please. But she won't forget it, she said. You've humiliated her. He gave a faint, bitter smile. Then I suppose we share that talent. The tension broke, and for a heartbeat she laughed despite herself. His eyes softened. Go rest, he said. Let them tire themselves with lies. She nodded, holding the rose tightly, and left. The next morning, the whispers doubled. Wherever she went, conversation stopped. By noon, Hilda came running to the laundry room, face pale. They're saying Lady Margaret's filed a complaint to the bishop's court, she said breathlessly, accusing you of tempting the Lord's honour. Evelyn dropped the basin she was carrying. What? It's madness, but it's written and sealed. If it reaches the bishop, it could ruin him. And you. Evelyn's heart pounded. I have to speak to him. Be careful, Hilda warned. He's in council with the steward now. Evelyn didn't wait. She hurried through the corridors, ignoring the stairs. When she reached the study, she found William at his desk, papers scattered, the steward standing beside him. My lord, she said, breathless. He looked up sharply. Evelyn, not now. I must speak with you, Lady Margaret. I know, he said. The steward told me. She's gone too far. The steward frowned. With respect, my lord, this situation damages your name. You should dismiss the girl, quietly. William's eyes turned cold. No. My lord, I said no. His voice thundered through the chamber. The steward stepped back, bowing stiffly. Evelyn stood frozen as William turned to her. You'll stay in your quarters tonight. I'll deal with this myself. What will you do? Remind Margaret who commands this house. She hesitated. Please don't. He cut her off. Enough. You've suffered enough of their cruelty. Let me bear this part. She wanted to argue, but his tone left no room. She bowed her head and left the room, fear gnawing at her chest. That evening the castle went silent. The storm outside had given way to heavy mist. Evelyn waited in her chamber, clutching the rose. Time crawled. She thought she heard footsteps, then voices in the corridor. The door opened suddenly. 2 guards entered. Evelyn of Tarrowfield, one said. Yes, by order of Lord Ravenshire you are to be confined. She stared at them, stunned. Confined? Why? Orders, the guard said. Move. They took her through the corridor, down the stairs, past the kitchens. The air grew colder. When they reached the lower halls, she realized where they were headed. The cells, she whispered. No. Please. Neither guard spoke. They opened an iron door and led her into a small stone chamber, damp and dimly lit. The door shut behind her with a heavy thud. She sank to the ground, her body trembling. She didn't know how long she sat there. The only sound was the drip of water and the faint echo of her heartbeat. At last she heard footsteps again. The door creaked open and light spilled inside. William stood there, his expression unreadable. My lord, she whispered. Why? His voice was low. I had no choice. They demanded proof that I do not favor you. This was the only way to protect you. Her eyes filled with tears. By imprisoning me, by keeping you alive, he said. If they think you're punished, they'll stop pressing for blood. She shook her head. You could have sent me away. And they would have hunted you. Here at least I can keep watch. His voice broke slightly, but he turned away before she could see it. You'll stay until I say otherwise. No one will harm you. I don't understand, she said softly. One moment you defend me, the next you lock me away. He met her gaze then, pain flickering in his eyes. Because I can't be what they already think I am. She didn't know what that meant, but his voice trembled with something deeper than anger, something like regret. Rest, he said. You'll be safe. He closed the door gently, and the darkness swallowed her again. Hours passed. Evelyn sat against the wall, exhausted, her hands wrapped around the rose. She thought of the villagers, of her father, of everything she'd lost. Then she thought of William, his quiet kindness, his contradictions, his loneliness. When the footsteps returned, she expected guards, but it was him again. He stepped inside, carrying a lantern and a blanket. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. I couldn't leave you like this. He laid the blanket beside her. Forgive me. She shook her head. You don't need my forgiveness. Yes, he said. I do. For a moment, neither moved. Then he said softly, You'll be released soon. I promise. And after? After, he said quietly, we'll both have to face what they've made of us. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. Evelyn, he said, his voice barely audible, you're free to leave tomorrow, if that's what you wish. William froze at her words. The flicker from the lantern cast uneven shadows across the cell, blurring the lines of his face. For a long time he didn't speak. Then, in a voice quieter than the dripping water around them, he said, You shouldn't say things like that. Evelyn rose from the cold floor, the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. Why not? Because I'm the reason you're down here. You said it was to protect me. It was, he replied, his jaw tightening, but protection shouldn't look like punishment. She stepped closer. Then free me now. I will. At dawn. Why not now? He looked away as if searching for words he didn't want to say. Because if they see you walk out of this cell tonight, they'll think I've lost control. Tomorrow, they'll think I've done my duty and moved on. That's the only way you'll be left in peace. She studied him, trying to read the truth behind his calm. And you? She asked. Will they leave you in peace? He gave a short, humorless laugh. I've forgotten what that feels like. She hesitated. Oh, you could start again, my lord. With what? He asked, his eyes suddenly fierce. A ruined name, a house full of spies and liars. Tell me, Evelyn, what's left for a man who's lost everything that ever mattered? Her voice was steady. You haven't lost everything yet. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the silence between them was alive. Then he turned sharply and set the lantern on the floor. Sleep if you can, he said. I'll see to your release at first light. She wanted to speak, but his face had already closed into the familiar mask of control. When he left, the door shut softly behind him. The next morning, a guard came with a key. You're free, he said gruffly. Evelyn followed him through the corridors, blinking as the sunlight struck her face for the first time in days. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of rain. In the courtyard, servants stopped to stare. She walked past them with her head high, though her knees trembled. At the main steps, William waited. His cloak was draped across his shoulders, his expression composed, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion. You kept your promise, she said quietly. I always keep my promises. He nodded to the guard, who withdrew. You can return to your quarters or leave the castle altogether. The choice is yours. Leave, she repeated. There's a wagon leaving for the southern village at noon. If you go, no one will stop you. If you stay, I can't promise what the others will say or do. Evelyn's hands tightened at her sides. And if I stay? Then you stay under my protection. That's what brought me here in the first place, she said softly. He winced slightly, as if struck. You're right. Neither spoke for a long moment. Then he said, Think about it. You have until midday. She turned to go, but his voice stopped her again. Evelyn, she looked back. I never wanted this for you. I know, she said. But maybe it's what was meant to happen. His gaze lingered on her as she disappeared into the castle halls. Hours passed. She wandered through the corridors, each one filled with memory, the corner where they'd first spoken, the hall where he'd given her the rose. When she reached her small chamber, the dried bloom still rested on the windowsill. She touched it gently, tracing the brittle petals. "Maybe I'm a fool," she murmured to herself. The door opened behind her. Hilda stepped in, her expression anxious. "You're free," she whispered. "Thank heavens." Evelyn turned. "How did you know?" "Everyone knows. The Lord's temper's cooled, but Lady Margaret's not finished. She's furious. Says your release proves he's bewitched." Evelyn frowned. "What will she do?" "Whatever she must to make you both pay." Evelyn took a breath. "Then I can't stay hidden. Where will you go?" "To him," she said simply. Hilda grabbed her arm. "Girl, don't. You'll only make it worse." "Maybe, but running won't change what's already been said." Before Hilda could stop her, Evelyn slipped out and made her way to the library. The heavy door was ajar. Inside, William sat at the table, head bowed over a pile of documents. "My lord," she said softly. He looked up, surprised. "You're supposed to be deciding." "I have." He set down his quill. "And? I'm not leaving." He stared at her, disbelief flashing across his face. "You understand what that means?" "Yes. It means I'm tired of letting other people decide my fate." "Evelyn, I was sold once," she said, her voice trembling. "I won't sell myself again for peace that doesn't exist." He rose from his chair slowly. "You'll be hated for it." "I've already been hated," she said. "At least this time I'll choose the reason." Something broke in his composure. He stepped closer, then stopped, his voice low. "Do you even know what you're saying?" "Yes, I know exactly what I'm saying." The silence that followed was heavy, charged. His hands flexed at his sides as if fighting something unseen. Finally he said, "You'll need a new assignment then. The others won't tolerate you in the kitchens anymore." "I'll do whatever's needed," she said. He studied her face, then nodded. "You'll serve in the archives. It's quiet there." "Is that your way of hiding me?" she asked gently. "It's my way of keeping you safe." She smiled faintly. "You keep doing that?" His lips curved slightly. "Bad habit." Days turned into a rhythm again. Evelyn worked among the shelves of old scrolls and maps, far from the whispers. Occasionally William would visit to review records. He always came with the same measured calm, but his eyes softened whenever he saw her. One afternoon, as she dusted a row of ledgers, she heard voices outside the door, Lady Margaret and the steward. "You think I can't see what's happening?" Margaret hissed. "He's protecting her." "Careful," the steward warned. "He's still your lord." "For now," she said coldly. "But the crown doesn't look kindly on impropriety. If she remains, his enemies will have reason to destroy him." Evelyn's breath caught. She waited until their footsteps faded, then ran down the corridor to the courtyard. William was there, speaking with the old soldier. "My lord," she said breathlessly, "they mean to ruin you. Lady Margaret's planning something." He dismissed the soldier with a nod. "Tell me." "She'll appeal to the crown. She wants you accused of dishonor, of breaking the vow of your title." His jaw tightened. "And what will she claim? That you've taken me as your—" She stopped, her face burning. He stepped closer. "Say it. That you've taken me as your mistress." He let out a sharp breath. "So that's their weapon. You have to stop her," Evelyn said. He smiled bitterly. "By denying it. She'd twist my words before they reached the city gates." "Then let me go," she said quickly. "If I leave, she loses her proof." He shook his head. "No. If you vanish, they'll say I hid you, or worse." She looked at him helplessly. "Then what choice do we have?" He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "None that will leave us whole." That night, the castle seemed colder. William didn't appear at supper, and rumors swirled again. Evelyn stayed in the archives until long after dark, the single candle burning low. She heard footsteps, then his voice. "Still awake?" She turned, startled. "I couldn't sleep." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Neither could I. The candlelight softened his features, and for the first time he looked almost young. "You shouldn't be here," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Probably not," he said. "But if I stayed away, I'd be wondering whether you regret staying." "I don't." He studied her face, his eyes dark and searching. "You should. Why?" Because you deserve a life that isn't chained to my mistakes. I don't see you as a mistake. Something flickered in his gaze like light through glass. Evelyn? Yes? He exhaled slowly. Forget this place. Forget me. Live. Her heart ached. I can't. He turned away sharply. You don't understand what you're saying. I do. No, he said, his voice rough. You think this is kindness. But the world beyond these walls won't see it that way. They'll call it sin, they'll call it betrayal. Let them call it what they will, she said quietly. He looked at her, his restraint cracking. And what would you call it? Truth. For a moment, neither moved. Then the candle flickered out, plunging the room into darkness. She heard him step closer, his breath uneven. You should go, he whispered. Should I? Yes, he said, though his voice trembled, before I forget who I'm supposed to be. She didn't move. The silence stretched until he said, barely audible, Evelyn, you're playing with fire. Her reply came steady and soft. Maybe it's time something burned. He drew in a sharp breath, but before either could speak again, a knock thundered at the door. My lord. It was the steward, his voice urgent. Lady Margaret requests your presence at once. It's about the letter to the crown. It's already begun, William said, his jaw tight as stone. He crossed the room in quick strides, grabbing his cloak from the chair. Evelyn followed, her pulse hammering. What will you do? She asked. Stop her before she sends that letter. Let me come with you. No, he said sharply. You'll stay here. I can help. His voice softened. You've done enough. Stay hidden, Evelyn. He turned and left before she could argue. She stood in the dark room, fists clenched until she couldn't bear it. Then she followed him. Down the corridor she heard raised voices from the great hall. William's tone was cold, precise. Lady Margaret's rang shrill in reply. Evelyn crept closer, pressing herself against the wall. You've overstepped your place, William said. My place? Margaret's laugh was brittle. Someone has to protect this house's name while you ruin it. I've ruined nothing. You've taken a servant into your favor, my lord. Do you think the crown will see mercy in that or sin? She's done nothing wrong, he said. Then why lock her away like a thief? Why hide her in shadows? Evelyn's stomach twisted. Margaret knew everything. William stepped closer, his voice dropped. You speak of honor while you spread filth. Do not mistake my patience for weakness. Margaret's tone turned icy. And do not mistake your title for safety. That letter is already sealed. By dawn, the messenger will be on the road to London. Evelyn gasped quietly. William froze. You wouldn't. I would, she said, smiling faintly. For the good of Ravenshire. He moved toward her, but the steward stepped between them. My lord, she's acting within her rights. The crown will decide. William's glare could have burned through steel. You think the king's court cares for truth? They care for scandal. They'll strip this estate bare before they ever listen. Margaret's chin lifted. Then perhaps Ravenshire should fall to a worthier name. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then William said, low and steady, You'll regret this. Margaret turned on her heel and swept out of the hall. The steward followed, his expression grim. When William saw Evelyn in the shadows, his eyes widened. I told you to stay away. I couldn't, she said. What will happen now? He exhaled slowly. If that letter reaches the crown, I'll be summoned. They'll accuse me of misconduct. They'll take the lands. And me? His eyes darkened. They'll call you a temptress, a liar. And they'll make sure you vanish quietly. Evelyn's heart raced. Then we have to stop it. He looked at her, the firelight catching the weariness in his face. There's only one road out tonight, and Margaret's guards will be watching it. Then we'll go another way. He stared at her, torn between disbelief and admiration. You're serious? Completely, she said. Tell me what to do. William hesitated, then pulled on his gloves. Fine, the messenger leaves from the east gate before dawn. We'll intercept him at the bridge. We? I won't send you alone. They slipped through the corridors like shadows. Outside, the night was bitter and wet. The horses snorted as William untied them. Do you know how to ride? He asked. Barely. Then hold tight. They rode into the darkness, the wind whipping at their cloaks. The road curved through fields glistening with frost. For a while, neither spoke. Only the pounding of hooves filled the night. At last Evelyn said, Why risk everything for me? He didn't answer at first. Then he said, "Because when I look at you, I remember who I was before I stopped believing in good things." Her throat tightened. "You shouldn't say that." "Why?" "Because it makes it harder to leave if we fail." He looked at her briefly, eyes unreadable. "Then we won't fail." They reached the bridge just as dawn brushed the horizon. In the distance, a lone rider approached, Margaret's messenger. William dismounted and drew his hood low. "Stay back," he whispered. The rider slowed at the sight of him. "Who goes there?" "Delivering new orders," William said calmly, stepping forward. "The lady changed her mind." The man frowned. "She gave me her seal, and she's sending me to retrieve it," William replied. "There was an error in the letter." The rider hesitated. Evelyn held her breath. "She said nothing about—" William moved fast, grabbing the man's reins. "Hand it over." The messenger drew back. "If this is a trick—" Evelyn stepped forward suddenly, pulling her hood back. "Please," she said, "if that letter reaches the capital, innocent people will be destroyed." The messenger blinked at her, uncertain. "Who are you?" "No one," she said. "Just someone begging you to do the right thing." Something in her voice broke through his hesitation. He reached into his coat and pulled out the sealed envelope. "Take it then. I want no part in your lord's quarrels." William accepted it with a nod. "You've made the right choice." The man turned his horse and rode off. Evelyn exhaled shakily. "We did it, for now," William said. He looked at the letter in his hand, the wax seal glinting red. "Margaret won't stop. She'll send another." "Then burn it," Evelyn said. He hesitated. "If I do, I destroy the only evidence that might prove her treachery." "Then hide it." He nodded slowly. "Yes, somewhere she'll never think to look." They rode back as the sun rose over the hills. By the time they reached the castle, the courtyard was already alive with servants. William handed the reins to a stable boy. "Say nothing of our return," he ordered. "Yes, my lord." He turned to Evelyn. "Go to your chamber. Act as if you've been there all night." "And you?" "I'll deal with Margaret." She hesitated. "Be careful." His lips curved faintly. "Always." She watched him disappear into the hall, the letter still hidden beneath his cloak. Later that morning, the castle trembled with tension. Lady Margaret stormed through the corridors, shouting for her messenger. When she found him missing, her fury echoed through every stone wall. Evelyn stayed silent, scrubbing floors with the other maids. Hilda whispered in her ear, "The lord's in a rage." Locked himself in the library with the steward. "Do they know?" "No one knows anything," Hilda said. "But everyone's afraid." As dusk fell, William called for Evelyn. She entered the library and found him standing by the fire, the letter gone. "It's hidden," he said. "For now, she's powerless." "Where did you put it?" "Somewhere even I might forget," he said with a faint smile. Then his expression darkened. "But she won't let it rest. She'll look for another way." "Then we'll be ready," Evelyn said. He looked at her, and for the first time in days his voice softened. "You say we as if you truly belong here." "Don't I?" He hesitated. "You shouldn't. But yes, perhaps you do." The words hung in the air like something dangerous. Evelyn's heart thudded. "My lord—" He cut her off gently. "William, when it's just us, you may call me William." She hesitated, then whispered, "William." His eyes closed briefly, as if the sound of his name hurt and healed all at once. "You make it sound human again." "Because you are," she said. Before he could reply, the door burst open. Lady Margaret stood there, pale with fury, flanked by guards. "My lord," she said, her voice trembling with anger, "you've betrayed me." "I could say the same," he replied coolly. "You intercepted my messenger. Your messenger carried slander. You defy me in my own hall," she cried. He took a step forward. "This is my hall, my land, my name." Margaret's face twisted. "Not for long. I've sent another letter. By now it's already on the road." Evelyn gasped. William's expression hardened. "Then you've sealed your fate." Margaret turned to the guards. "Arrest her," she ordered, pointing at Evelyn. The guards hesitated. William's voice was thunder. "Touch her, and you'll answer to me." Margaret's lips curled. "You'll damn yourself for a servant?" "I'd rather damn myself than bow to lies," he said. The standoff froze the room. The guards backed away, unsure. Margaret's voice dropped, cold and venomous. Then you've chosen your ruin. She swept out, her cloak billowing behind her. Evelyn turned to him, shaking. What now? He exhaled. Now we wait. Days passed in tense silence. Messengers came and went. The servants avoided speaking to Evelyn. William spent long hours in his study, pacing, reading letters, waiting for news. One evening, as the sun dipped low, the old soldier came limping into the hall. "A rider approaches, my lord," he said, "with the royal crest." William stood still for a moment, then looked toward Evelyn. "It seems our waiting is over." She stepped forward. "Will they take you?" His voice was quiet. "If they believe her lies, yes." "And me?" "They'll take you too." The soldier hesitated. "Shall I bar the gates, my lord?" William shook his head. "No, let them come. I won't hide." He looked at Evelyn, his eyes steady. "No matter what happens, know this. I regret nothing." Before she could reply, the horns of the royal guard echoed through the valley. The courtyard filled with shouts and the clatter of armor. Torches flickered as riders in royal colors dismounted and spread across the stones. Evelyn's heart pounded as she stood beside William at the top of the steps. The captain of the guard stepped forward, his voice loud and official. "Lord William Ravenshire, by order of His Majesty's Council, you are charged with defiance of the crown and withholding property of the realm. You will come with us at once." William's expression didn't change. "You have your orders," he said calmly, "but you'll not march into my hall like thieves in the night." The captain hesitated, thrown off by his composure. "I come under seal of the king himself." "Then you'll show that seal before you set foot inside." The man signaled one of his soldiers, who handed him a parchment. He held it out. William took it, broke the wax, and read in silence. His jaw tightened. "Lies," he said simply. Evelyn could barely breathe. "What does it say?" "That I've betrayed the realm by selling grain to our enemies." He crumpled the paper in his hand. "Margaret's revenge has found its shape." The captain cleared his throat. "My lord, I must ask you to come quietly. We have no wish to use force." William's eyes flicked toward Evelyn. "There will be no need for force." "No," she said suddenly. "You can't go with them. You've done nothing wrong." He looked at her gently. "If I resist, they'll burn the castle and hang half my men. I won't give them that excuse." The guard stepped closer. Evelyn's hands trembled. "Then let me come with you." William shook his head. "You must stay. They'll need someone to speak when I can't." "But that's an order," he said quietly. "Trust me once more." He turned to the captain. "Give me 1 hour to settle my affairs." The captain hesitated, then nodded. "At dawn, we ride." When they left, Evelyn followed William inside, her voice barely steady. "There must be something we can do." "There is," he said, walking quickly toward his study. "But it's dangerous." "What is it?" He opened a drawer and took out a bundle of papers bound with twine. "Proof that the treachery Margaret accused me of wasn't mine. It was my brother's." "You have a brother?" "I had," he said grimly. "He vanished years ago after forging my seal on trade letters. I thought he was dead. Now I think Margaret found his records and used them to trap me." "Then this clears you," she said. "Not if it stays here. The crown will never believe me without witness." "Then I'll go," she said instantly. "I'll take it to the city." He turned sharply. "No, the roads are watched. You'd be caught before the 2nd mile. Then who will take it?" He looked at her, his eyes full of conflict. "I don't know, but someone must." A knock sounded at the door. The old soldier entered, bowing stiffly. "My lord, I've served you long enough to know trouble when I see it. Tell me what needs done." William handed him the papers. "These must reach the Bishop of Ely before the crown's men do. Can you ride?" The old man smiled faintly. "I've got one good leg left. It'll do." Evelyn stepped forward. "You'll need help. Let me go with you." William's hand closed around her arm. "You'll do no such thing." "I can keep records, speak to the bishop, tell him what happened." "I said no." She met his gaze stubbornly. "If you trust me at all, let me prove it." He looked at her for a long moment, then exhaled. "Very well, you'll go, but if anything happens—" "I'll make it," she said. He nodded once. "Take the north road. Avoid the main gate. Leave before dawn." The old soldier saluted. "Aye, my lord." When they were gone, William stood still, staring into the fire. Evelyn lingered by the door. "You shouldn't have agreed," he said quietly. "I couldn't let you face this alone. You've already risked too much." She shook her head. "If it saves you, it's worth it." He moved closer, the firelight catching in his eyes. "You speak as if my life means something beyond this place." "It does," she said. "To me." His breath caught, and for a heartbeat, the distance between them vanished. Then he turned away. "Go, before I change my mind." She left quickly, heart racing. By dawn, the castle courtyard was filled with soldiers. William stood by his horse, cloak whipping in the wind. Evelyn watched from the shadows as he mounted. Their eyes met once. He gave a small nod. No smile, just a quiet promise. The gates opened, and he rode out surrounded by guards. The sound of hooves faded into the mist. Hilda appeared beside Evelyn. "Where's he going?" "To face the king's men," Evelyn whispered. "And I'm going to stop it." Hilda's eyes widened. "You'll be killed if they catch you." "Then they'll have to catch me first." By mid-morning, Evelyn and the old soldiers slipped through a side gate, their horses light and fast. The road wound through the forest thick with fog. "Keep your hood up," the soldier warned. "The less you're seen, the better." They rode for hours, stopping only to water the horses. When they reached the crossroads, the soldier pointed north. "Ely's that way, 2 days' ride if we're lucky." "Then we ride till dark," Evelyn said. That night, they camped near a stream. The soldier built a small fire. "You care for him, don't you?" he asked suddenly. Evelyn froze. "He's my lord." The old man chuckled softly. "That's not what I asked." She looked into the flames. "He's more than what people say he is. He's kind, even when he doesn't want to be." "That kind of man's worth saving," the soldier said. "Rest. Tomorrow will test us both." They rose before dawn. The wind bit at their faces as they rode north. At midday, a patrol of riders appeared on the horizon. "Royal colours," the soldier muttered. Off the road, they darted into the trees just in time. The patrol thundered past, unaware. Evelyn pressed her back to a tree, heart pounding. "Too close," the soldier said, when the noise faded. "They're looking for us." "Then we're on the right path," she said. They rode again until the spires of Ely appeared faintly through the fog. Relief flooded her chest, until they reached the gates and saw the royal crest hanging there. "The crown's already here," the soldier whispered. Evelyn's stomach dropped. "Then we'll find another way in." They circled to the east wall, where the cathedral's garden stretched along the river. A low gate stood unguarded. Evelyn slipped through, clutching the bundle of papers. Inside the courtyard, monks tended to the grounds, their hoods low. One looked up as she approached. "Child, are you lost?" "I need to see the bishop," she said. "It's urgent." He studied her, then nodded toward the cloisters. "Follow the inner path." She hurried through the arches until she reached a large door. 2 guards stood outside. The soldier caught up with her, breathing hard. "Let me speak." He handed the guard a coin. "For a good cause," he said. "The bishop expects us." The guard hesitated, then stepped aside. "Be quick." Inside, the bishop sat at a desk, quill in hand. His eyes were pale and sharp. "What business brings you here?" Evelyn stepped forward, holding out the bundle. "This. Proof that Lord Ravenshire was framed. Please, you must see it before the crown does." The bishop took the papers, scanning them. His brow furrowed. "Forged seals. Trade contracts." "My word." "It was his brother," she said quickly. "Lord William is innocent." The bishop looked at her intently. "And who are you to know this?" "Someone who believes the truth still matters." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Very well, I'll read these myself. If they are what you claim, I'll send word to the council immediately." Relief surged through her. "Thank you." But before he could answer, a voice shouted outside. "Search every room! They're here!" Evelyn turned to the window. Soldiers filled the courtyard, Margaret's men, not the king's. The bishop stood quickly. "You must leave, now!" The old soldier grabbed her arm. "Back through the garden!" They ran, dodging through the cloisters. Arrows clattered off the stone. Evelyn clutched the bishop's written note of witness as they escaped through the side gate. By dusk they reached the hills overlooking Ravenshire. Smoke rose from the chimneys. "They've brought him back," the soldier said grimly. "But as a prisoner." Evelyn's throat tightened. "Then we'll free him." "You can't storm a castle guarded by the king's men," he said. Then I'll walk through the gate, she replied. They won't hurt a servant. He stared at her, then nodded slowly. You've more courage than sense, girl. But I'll not stop you. That night, Evelyn approached the castle under the cover of darkness. She slipped through a servant's entrance and crept into the main hall. The sound of chains echoed faintly from below. 2 guards stood at the dungeon door. She waited until they moved to fetch wine, then darted inside. William sat against the wall, his hands bound, his face pale but steady. When he saw her, disbelief flashed across his features. Evelyn? How? She knelt beside him, holding up the bishop's note. Proof. The bishop believes you. We just have to get this to the royal envoy. He shook his head. You shouldn't be here. Too late. She began working at the knots on his wrists. Once we reached the stables, the old soldier's waiting. We'll be gone before dawn. He caught her hands. Evelyn, listen, if they find you... They won't. She freed one hand, then the other. Come on. They moved quietly through the corridor. The torches flickered low. Just as they neared the door to the courtyard, voices rang out behind them. There, stop them! Guards rushed forward. William pushed Evelyn behind him. Run! No! He turned to face the soldiers, fury blazing in his eyes. You'll not touch her! The guards dragged William down the corridor, their boots striking the stone in rhythm. Evelyn fought to reach him, but one of the soldiers caught her arm and shoved her back. Let him go, she shouted, struggling. William twisted against their grip, but the chains around his wrists clattered loudly. Evelyn, stay back. They forced him down the stairway toward the great hall. Torches flared as Lady Margaret appeared at the top of the steps, flanked by the steward and the royal captain. Her smile was sharp. Lord Ravenshire, she said, it seems you couldn't stay out of trouble, even in chains. William's voice was steady. I could say the same for you. She stepped closer, lowering her tone. You think this ends with you. The crown will see the truth soon enough. The world will know what you've done. Evelyn burst forward. He's innocent. Margaret's eyes snapped toward her. And here's the root of it all, the girl who turned a lord into a fool. She risked her life for justice, William said sharply. Margaret gave a cold laugh. Justice? You mistake obsession for virtue. She turned to the captain. This is the woman. She's been interfering with the king's investigation. The captain frowned. My orders were to take the lord, not his servants. Then take them both, Margaret said. The crown will want to see the face of temptation. The captain hesitated. My lady, the king's men deal in law, not rumor. Do as I say, she hissed. William stepped forward despite the chains. Touch her, and I'll see you hanged for treason. Margaret's expression hardened. Bold words for a condemned man. Evelyn's voice cut through the air. You're lying, Margaret. The Bishop of Ely has already seen the evidence. He's sending word to the council. Your lies won't last the week. For the first time, Margaret's composure faltered. You're bluffing. Evelyn reached into her cloak and held up the bishop's note. Read it yourself. The steward took it from her and examined the seal. His face drained of color. My lady, it's genuine. Margaret snatched it from his hands, reading quickly. Her eyes widened as she realized. You went to Ely? Yes, Evelyn said, and the bishop believes him. The captain stepped closer. If this is true, my orders may no longer stand. William met his gaze. Then do your duty. Free me and arrest the real traitor. Margaret's voice rose, sharp and desperate. You fool! That letter proves nothing. But the steward interrupted, his voice trembling. My lady, there's mention of forged seals, trades under your authority. If the bishop confirms— Enough! She shouted. I will not be lectured by servants and liars. William's chains rattled as he straightened. You'll answer for this, Margaret. Her eyes blazed. Not before you do. She grabbed a guard's sword and leveled it at him. The hall went silent. Put it down, William said calmly. Everything I built you took from me, she hissed. I saved this house when your pride nearly ruined it, and you repay me with shame. You ruined yourself, he said. You used deceit and fear. That's not loyalty. Her hands trembled. You think the king cares for loyalty? You think he'll forgive a lord who defies his counsel? You'll hang, William, and so will she. The captain moved quickly, wrenching the blade from her grasp. That's enough, he said. You've overstepped your rank. Margaret stared at him, breathless. You can't— By royal command, the captain said. I place you under arrest for falsifying evidence and obstructing justice." The guards seized her arms. She fought them, screaming, "This isn't over. He'll fall with me. They all will." Her voice echoed through the hall as they dragged her away. William stood silent for a moment, the tension slowly breaking. The captain turned to him. "My lord, I'll need to confirm this with the bishop's letter. Until then, you're free within the castle. The king's final judgment will depend on his word." William inclined his head. "That's all I ask." When the soldiers left, the hall fell quiet except for the crackle of torches. Evelyn stepped closer, her hands shaking. "It's over," she said softly. He looked at her, the weight of exhaustion in his eyes. "Not yet, but you've done what I couldn't. You saved me. You would have done the same." He shook his head. "You don't understand. I was ready to surrender. You made me fight again." She smiled faintly. "Then we'll both rest when it's truly over." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You should rest now. You've done enough for a lifetime." She caught his hand before he could pull away. "Don't tell me to rest when you can't either." He laughed quietly, the sound strange in the empty hall. "You've grown fearless. I learned from you." The steward cleared his throat softly from the doorway. "My lord, the bishop's messenger has arrived at the gate. He brings news." William's expression hardened again. "Send him in." Moments later, a young rider entered, dust-covered and pale. He bowed low. "My lord, the bishop has sent his verdict. Has presented the evidence to the king's council. They believe you've been falsely accused. Orders for your release and restoration are on their way." Evelyn exhaled a shaky breath. William closed his eyes briefly, as if letting go of a weight that had crushed him for years. "And Margaret?" he asked. "She's to be tried for perjury and treason," the messenger said. The steward murmured. "Then Ravenshire stands again?" William nodded slowly. "So it does." He turned to Evelyn. "You've given it back its honor." "I didn't do it for the castle," she said softly. "I did it for you." The messenger bowed again and withdrew. Silence returned, soft and warm. For a moment they simply stood there. The firelight flickered between them, and Evelyn realized how close they were. His gaze lingered on her, the guarded walls in his expression finally beginning to break. "You should know," he said quietly. "When they dragged me away, the only thing I feared losing was you." She shook her head, tears welling. "Don't say that." "It's true. If you say it now, I'll start believing you mean it." He smiled faintly. "And what would be so terrible about that?" "Everything," she whispered. "Because I'd never want to leave." His hand rose, hovering near her cheek. "Then don't." The door opened suddenly. The steward stepped in again, flustered. "Forgive me, my lord, but the council's representative has arrived to confirm your innocence." William nodded. "Prepare the hall." Evelyn turned away quickly, wiping her eyes. "You should face them alone." He caught her hand. "You're part of this story now. You'll stand with me." She hesitated, but his grip was steady, warm. "All right," she said. The great hall filled once more. The royal envoy entered, a tall man in dark robes carrying the king's seal. "Lord Ravenshire," he announced, "by the order of His Majesty and the testimony of the Bishop of Ely, you are cleared of all charges. The Crown recognizes your loyalty and service." William bowed his head. "I serve as I always have." The envoy turned to Evelyn. "And you are the witness who delivered the evidence?" She nodded, uneasy. "Yes, my lord." "Then know this," the envoy said. "Your courage preserved a noble house from ruin. The Crown will hear of it." "Thank you," she said quietly. When he left, applause rippled softly through the gathered servants. For the first time in months, Ravenshire's walls seemed to breathe again. William turned to her, smiling faintly. "It's done. It feels unreal," she whispered. "Real enough to start again." He offered his arm, and she took it. Together they walked toward the great doors. The dawn light spilled through, painting the floor in gold. In the courtyard, the guards bowed as they passed. The air smelled of spring rain. "Will you stay?" he asked as they reached the steps. She looked at him, startled. "You're asking." "I'm not your master," he said softly. "Not anymore. You never were." He laughed quietly. "No, I suppose not." They stopped beneath the archway, the sky beginning to brighten. For the first time, his expression was free of anger and fear. "You've changed everything," he said. "You gave me back my life." "You gave me mine first," she said. He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Evelyn, when the world called me guilty, you called me good. I'll never forget that." She smiled through her tears. "Then don't." Before either could say more, a soldier rushed from the gate, breathless. "My lord!" Riders approached from the east, bearing the king's colours again. William's smile faded. "The king's colours?" "Yes, my lord. They say they come for the bishop's witness." Evelyn turned sharply. "For me?" The soldier nodded. "They claim the council demands her testimony in person." William's eyes darkened. "Then it's not finished after all." William turned to her, his jaw tight, his eyes fierce. "You won't go alone." Evelyn shook her head. "If they're calling me to testify, they'll expect me. If you go with me, they'll call it influence. I don't care what they call it." She took his hand, her voice steady but low. "If you fight the king's order, they'll take everything you just won back. Let me do this, William. Let me finish it." He stared at her for a long moment, torn between fear and pride. "You're braver than I ever was." She smiled faintly. "No, I just learned from the best." The sound of hooves grew louder. The royal riders entered the courtyard, their armor flashing in the sunlight. The captain dismounted and bowed stiffly. "We come for the witness Evelyn of Tarrow Field. By order of His Majesty's Council, she is to appear before the Bishop of Ely and the royal justices to confirm her testimony." William stepped forward. "You have her word already. The bishop's letter stands." The captain's expression did not change. "The council demands her presence, my lord. She will be treated with respect and returned safely." Evelyn stepped forward before William could argue. "I'll come willingly." William's voice was sharp. "No, Evelyn." She looked back at him, her eyes calm. "Trust me, please." He clenched his fists but said nothing more. The captain gestured to one of his men. "Prepare the carriage." Evelyn turned to William as they approached the gate. "You said once that I should speak freely. Now it's time to do it for both of us." He nodded slowly. "Then speak the truth and come back to me." She smiled through the fear. "Always." As the carriage rolled away, William stood in the courtyard until it vanished over the hill. The road to Ely was long but quiet. The soldiers rode ahead and behind, forming a protective circle. Evelyn sat near the window, watching the trees flash by. Every turn of the wheels brought her closer to the city, to judgment, or to freedom. When they reached the cathedral grounds, the bishop himself waited at the steps. His face was kind, but grave. "You've done a great thing, child," he said softly as he helped her down. "But the council is divided. Some still believe the lady's lies. You'll need to be strong." "I've been afraid before," Evelyn said. "I know what to do with fear." Inside, the council chamber smelled of wax and parchment. 12 men sat behind a long table, their robes gleaming in the morning light. Evelyn stood before them, her hands folded. One of the justices leaned forward. "You are the witness known as Evelyn of Tarrow Field." "Yes, my lord." "You claim to have discovered forged documents that prove Lord Ravenshire's innocence?" "I don't claim it," she said clearly. "I brought them here myself." Another justice lifted a page. "And how did a servant girl come by such evidence?" "I found them while serving in his house," she said. "They were hidden among trade ledgers under the name of his brother. When I realized what they meant, I went to the bishop." A murmur ran through the chamber. One man frowned. "You risked your life for this, lord. Why?" Evelyn met his eyes without flinching. "Because he's an honest man. Because truth shouldn't depend on birth or power." A silence followed. Then the eldest of the council spoke. "You speak boldly for one of your station." "I was sold by my family for a sack of grain," she said, her voice trembling but strong. "I learned early that silence feeds the powerful. I will not be silent again." The words echoed in the vaulted chamber. Even the scribes paused in their writing. The bishop nodded approvingly. "Her courage is clear. I can vouch for her testimony and for the authenticity of the documents she delivered." The eldest justice turned to his peers. They whispered among themselves, their faces unreadable. Finally, he looked at her again. "You may step back while we deliberate." Evelyn bowed slightly and followed the bishop into the antechamber. He poured her water, his hands gentle. "You've done all that was asked. Will it be enough?" she asked. He sighed. "Justice moves slower than faith, but your words carried weight." Hours passed before the doors opened again. The council's messenger called for her. She walked back into the chamber, her pulse loud in her ears. The eldest justice rose. Evelyn of Tarrow Field, this council finds your testimony truthful and your evidence sound. The charges against Lord Ravenshire are dismissed. His lands and titles are hereby restored. Relief flooded her so swiftly she nearly swayed. The bishop steadied her arm. The justice continued. Furthermore, by His Majesty's will, you are granted safe passage and protection under the Crown's seal for services rendered to the realm. Evelyn bowed her head, tears stinging her eyes. Thank you, my lord. You've done England a service, the man said. You may return to Ravenshire as a free woman. Those last words struck deep. For the first time in her life, she truly was free. When she stepped out of the cathedral, the sunlight felt different, warmer, lighter. The captain of the Royal Guard waited beside the carriage. Your testimony has ended, my lady. She blinked at the title. I'm no lady. He smiled faintly. The court may see it differently now. The road home seemed shorter. She watched the fields roll by, the wind stirring her hair. Every mile brought her closer to the place where everything had begun, and where perhaps it could begin again. By dusk, Ravenshire's towers rose in the distance. The gates opened as the carriage approached, and William was waiting at the steps. He looked thinner, more tired, but his eyes were alive. When she stepped down, he crossed the courtyard in 3 strides and caught her hands. You're safe. So are you, she said. What did they say? That you're cleared, completely, and that I'm under the king's protection. He laughed, a sound she hadn't heard in so long it startled her. Then the world's gone mad. Or right again, she said, smiling. He studied her face, his thumb brushing over a streak of dust on her cheek. You've been through too much. So have you, she said softly. But it's over now. He shook his head. Not over. Just different. The steward appeared behind them, bowing low. My lord, the bishop's messenger arrived before her. The men are cheering. Ravenshire stands whole again. William nodded, but his eyes never left Evelyn. Whole because of her. The steward smiled. Then she'll have our thanks forever. That night the castle celebrated. Fires burned in the courtyard, and laughter filled the air for the first time in years. Evelyn stood at the edge of the hall, watching the people who had once whispered against her now raise their cups in her honor. Hilda approached grinning. Look at you, a royal witness, a free woman and the Lord's Saviour. Not bad for a girl from Tarrow Field. Evelyn laughed softly. I only did what I had to. Hilda nudged her. And what now? You'll stay? Evelyn looked toward the dais where William sat surrounded by his men, a faint smile on his face. I don't know yet. Then I'll wager you do, Hilda said, chuckling, and left her there. Later, as the fires burned low, William found her on the balcony overlooking the valley. The wind carried the smell of rain. Do you ever think, he said quietly, that fate has a cruel sense of humor? Sometimes, she said, but I think it has a kind one too. He leaned on the railing beside her. You've changed this place. You've changed me. I only reminded you who you already were, she said. He looked at her, his voice softer. You reminded me how to hope again. She turned to face him fully. And what will you do with that hope? He smiled faintly. I thought I'd ask you the same. They stood in silence, the last light fading behind the hills. Finally he said, Evelyn, the king's pardon frees you from this life. You could go anywhere, do anything. You owe this castle nothing. I know, she said. So why stay? Because this is where I found my voice, she said simply, and because someone here still needs me. He took a slow breath, as if her words were something fragile he didn't dare touch. And if that someone is me, she smiled, then I suppose I'll stay a little longer. For a long time neither spoke. The sounds of music and laughter drifted up from below. Ravenshire was alive again. When the first drops of rain began to fall, William lifted his cloak and draped it over her shoulders. You'll catch cold, he said. She looked up at him, her eyes bright. Not tonight. He hesitated, then said quietly, Tomorrow, I'll send word to the villagers. The famine's easing, we'll rebuild the market, start again. And you, she asked, what will you start? He smiled faintly. Something I should have started long ago. She wanted to ask more, but footsteps interrupted them. The steward appeared, bowing low. "Forgive me, my lord. A rider just arrived from the bishop. He carries the king's final decree." William took the sealed parchment. "What does it say?" The steward hesitated. "It concerns you both." William broke the seal and read quickly, his expression unreadable. Then he handed it to Evelyn. Her eyes moved over the words. Her breath caught. He wants us both in London, to appear before the king himself." "The king?" she whispered. "Why?" William's voice was quiet. "To honor us, perhaps, or to test us again." Evelyn folded the letter, her pulse racing. "Then our story isn't finished." "No," William said, his gaze steady on hers. "It's only changing." She looked toward the horizon, where dawn began to edge the clouds in gold. "Do you think it will ever truly be over?" "Only when we decide it is," he said. They stood side by side, the wind soft around them, the future uncertain but brightening with the coming day. There were no chains now, no whispers, no fear, only the quiet promise of what came next. The journey to London began at dawn. Ravenshire's banners fluttered in the wind as William and Evelyn rode through the gates side by side. The air was crisp, the sky pale gold. Villagers lined the road to watch them go. Some waved, others bowed their heads in quiet respect. "You've turned them from fear to faith," William said softly as they passed. Evelyn smiled. "They finally see what I saw all along." He looked at her, eyes bright. "And what was that?" "A man worth believing in." They rode in silence after that, the sound of hooves filling the cool morning air. By nightfall, they reached the royal city. London was alive with noise, bells, laughter, the hum of 1,000 voices. The castle loomed above it all, a sea of banners and light. William dismounted and turned to her. "Ready?" She took a steadying breath. "As I'll ever be." Inside, they were led through endless corridors until they reached the throne hall. Torches burned in high sconces, their flames dancing against gold and stone. The king sat on his throne, stern but not unkind. William knelt. "Your Majesty." Evelyn followed suit. The king regarded them for a long moment before speaking. "Rise, both of you." They obeyed. "I've heard much of what's happened in Ravenshire," the king said. "A lord accused by his own steward, a servant girl who defied the crown to bring truth to light. You've stirred half my court to argument." Evelyn lowered her gaze. "Forgive me, sire. I meant no trouble." "Trouble?" The king's mouth twitched into a faint smile. "You meant justice. Few would risk so much for another's name. The realm needs more of that." He turned to William. "And you, Lord Ravenshire, you've endured disgrace, imprisonment, and loss, yet you stand here unbowed. What do you intend to do with the life that's been returned to you?" William hesitated, then said quietly, "To use it well, Your Majesty, to lead with honor, and to protect those who taught me its meaning." The king studied him for a moment, then looked between them. "It seems to me that you owe each other something beyond gratitude." Evelyn's breath caught. "Sire, I may be a king, but I'm not blind. There's affection between you, a bond forged by trial." William glanced at her. "Your Majesty," the king raised a hand, "I'm not here to forbid it. The old laws would, but I've seen enough to know worth doesn't always wear a title. If you wish to join your fates, I'll not stand in your way." The hall fell silent. Evelyn stared at him, unsure she'd heard correctly. "You would allow that?" "Allow?" The king's eyes softened. "Child, I would bless it." William turned fully toward her. "Evelyn," he said, voice low but steady, "he's given us something neither of us ever had before, choice." Her heart hammered. "And what would you choose, my lord?" He stepped closer, forgetting the watching courtiers. "To spend the rest of my days proving you were right to believe in me, to build something honest out of the wreck I once was." Her throat tightened. "William." He reached for her hand, his eyes searching hers. "Evelyn of Tarrowfield, will you stand beside me, not as servant or savior, but as my equal?" For a moment the world held its breath. Then she smiled through her tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The hall erupted in murmurs. The king chuckled softly. "Then let it be known that Lord William Ravenshire and Evelyn of Tarrowfield are to be joined in marriage under the crown's blessing." The heralds repeated his words. The great doors opened, and sunlight streamed into the chamber as if the heavens themselves approved. William turned to her again. "It's real," he said, half laughing. After everything, it's real. Evelyn squeezed his hand. So are we. The king motioned for the Bishop of Ely, who had travelled with them, to step forward. If the couple wishes, we can seal the union now. The realm would welcome such a beginning after so much strife. William looked at Evelyn, his voice barely a whisper. Will you marry me here now before all of them? Her answer came without hesitation. Yes. The bishop smiled, opening his book. Then let the heavens witness this union born of truth and tested by fire. The ceremony was simple but radiant. William's hand trembled slightly as he placed the ring, his mother's worn and plain upon her finger. When the bishop spoke the final words, the hall burst into applause. William leaned close. You're shaking, he murmured. So are you, she whispered back. He laughed softly, a sound full of wonder. I never thought I'd have this again. You never lost it, she said. It was waiting for you. When the crowd parted, the king approached them once more. You've both given this kingdom something rare, a story of mercy. Guard it well. We will, William promised. They bowed, and as they left the hall, Evelyn could hear the courtiers whispering, not with disdain, but with awe. Outside, the courtyard glowed in the afternoon light. Bells rang across the city, echoing through every street and tower. The people cheered as William took her hand and helped her into the carriage that would carry them home. Married, she said softly, almost to herself. He smiled. Does it sound strange? It sounds impossible. He reached for her hand again. Everything worth having once did. The road back to Ravenshire felt lighter than ever before. When they arrived, the castle stood dressed in flowers and banners, prepared by the servants who had heard the news before them. The air smelled of spring. The gates opened wide, and villagers crowded inside to see the lord and his new lady. Hilda ran forward, laughing and crying at once. Look at you both, I told everyone this day would come. Evelyn laughed through her tears. You did, didn't you? Hilda squeezed her hands. We'll feast till dawn. The kitchens are already on fire with work. William placed a hand on Hilda's shoulder. Then make sure every villager eats before we do. No one goes hungry tonight. As you wish, my lord. The celebrations began at sunset. Music filled the courtyard, lively and warm. Servants danced with soldiers. Children chased ribbons in the firelight. Evelyn sat beside William at the long table, watching the joy spread like a tide. You see, she said, this is what Ravenshire was meant to be. He looked around, his eyes soft. Because of you. Because of us, she corrected. When the moon rose high, William stood and raised his cup. To the woman who taught me that strength has nothing to do with titles, and that love can rebuild what the world tries to destroy. The crowd cheered. Evelyn blushed, laughing as the villagers clinked their cups and shouted her name. Later, when the fires burned low and the music faded, William took her hand and led her toward the gardens. The night was cool, the air filled with the scent of wet grass and roses newly planted. Do you remember this place? He asked. How could I forget? It's where you gave me the rose. He smiled. The one that didn't bloom. It did, she said, looking at him. It just needed time. He reached into his coat and pulled something from inside. A small bloom, fresh and red, glowing in the moonlight. This one grew from that same stem, he said. I thought it might be yours again. Her eyes filled. It's beautiful. So are you, he whispered. The words hung between them, simple and true. Say it again, she said softly. He stepped closer. You're beautiful, Evelyn Ravenshire. She laughed, a soft, breathless sound. That's the first time you've called me that, and the last name I'll ever want to say. The moonlight shimmered on the water as he kissed her. It was gentle at first, then deeper, full of all the unspoken years between them. The world around them faded. The war, the whispers, the pain. There was only this moment, quiet and alive. When they finally broke apart, she leaned her forehead against his chest. What happens now? He wrapped his arms around her. Now we build. We heal. We live. And love, she asked. He smiled against her hair. That most of all. The wind stirred the leaves, and the sound of laughter drifted from the distant courtyard. The stars stretched wide above them, endless and clear. Evelyn lifted her face, meeting his eyes. We were both prisoners once, she said. Now look at us. Free, he murmured. Completely free. She took his hand, and together they walked back toward the castle, where candles still burned in the windows like 1,000 promises. The night wrapped around them, gentle and sure, carrying the scent of roses and the echo of joy. As they crossed the threshold, he paused and looked back at the sky. "Do you think she would have been proud?" "Who?" "Your mother," he said quietly. "And mine." Evelyn smiled. "Yes, because we learned what they never did. That love isn't weakness. It's strength." He nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "And it saved us both." She squeezed his hand. "It did." They entered the hall together. The firelight danced on the walls, warm and golden. William turned to her once more, his eyes soft with something she had only ever seen in dreams. "Whatever happens, wherever we go, remember this," he said. "You were never bought, Evelyn, you were found." Her voice trembled with emotion. "And loved." "Yes," he said, drawing her close. "And loved." The doors closed behind them, shutting out the night, sealing the promise that had carried them through every trial. The castle, once a place of sorrow, now rang with laughter and life. Outside, the rose garden swayed gently in the wind, a single red bloom opening at last beneath the moon. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.